Carl, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's so wonderful to have you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm just so excited to talk about your new book.
Of course, Natalie. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Well, I mean, I know you from Society of Advice, been a part of your group for a while now, taking your retreats. But for everybody who maybe doesn't know you, what you do, the value that you bring to the world, I'm just hoping you can share a little bit about you before we dive in.
Sure. I mean, this goes back a ways, but I've been in the financial services industry, sort of speaking broadly, for a long time. And part of that, back in the day, you used to have to find your own way, right? Like there wasn't a career path really for financial planner, but you sort of, as I found my own way, I eventually ended up with my own independent financial advisory firm. And part of that was drawing these little, and I was not an artist as obvious by anybody who's seen the work, but I wasn't a doodler either. And I just found myself in a meeting once. I remember who it was actually with. I remember who the clients were. They're really, really smart, successful people. And I was trying to explain a concept to them that they weren't getting. Like, it was really important. And I could tell by their faces they weren't understanding. And I had this odd realization that I was like, oh no, these are really smart, successful people and they're not getting it. It must be me. And so out of sort of an act of really almost desperation, for the first time, I stood up in the conference room I was in. There was a whiteboard. And I drew something on the whiteboard. I can't remember what I drew, but I'm sure it was just like some squares and some arrows and some circles. And I think it was about cash flow, saving for retirement. The money's going one way. In retirement, we might reverse the flow a little bit, something like that. And they were both like, oh, I get it now. And so I sort of got addicted to that feeling, that moment of something being kind of complex and obscure, and then suddenly simplifying it and making it easier to understand. And so I started doing those publicly on a little blog, and nobody was reading it except my mom and my sister. And one day I got an email from the editor at the New York Times, and it was really almost this dramatic, that said, hey, I love these. Would you consider doing them for us? And I knew enough to say yes to that. And that led to this column that ran every week for 10 years. And then, my first 2 books. And at a certain point I had to decide, do I keep my firm or do I do this? And I decided to sell the firm and write and speak and teach and coach. And it's been incredible. So ever since, I've just been really traveling around the world talking about, like, how do we make sense of this crazy situation that we call money? And how do we fit it into our lives? And how do we talk about it? And how do we give advice around it? So that's the short. And so then I haven't written a book for, I think, One Page Financial Plan came out in 2014. So, we're talking over 10 years. And that's been very intentional. I've been waiting and wondering. And so, yeah, this new book comes out in October, and I'm really, really excited about it.
So why now then?
Yeah, it's interesting. My sense is that there is still something, like, my goal is not to have a book. My goal is to start 1 million conversations, like 1 million meaningful conversations around money. And so if I started with that goal, like, how can I, because and again, that's not even the goal. The goal really is to lower the global anxiety around money. Like, that's the goal. And that doesn't seem to be getting better. Like, as I look out the window, like, the people out there, I know I don't feel any better about how to talk about money. And, if I go to the mailbox, this just happened to me last week. I went to the mailbox and opened the mailbox, and there was a letter. Letters, I'm flipping through them, and one from the IRS. And I could feel like, I don't even know what's in it. Like, the tension and the stories and I'm in trouble, and my dad got in trouble with the IRS, and I almost went to prison. Like, there's all these stories, and then I open it and it was like a change of address request. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was as benign as it gets, but I had gone, we're all doing that on repeat every announcement of a tariff, every announcement, like independent of what you think about any of those things, they're playing stories. And so my goal was like, how can I contribute to reducing the global anxiety around money? Okay, how can I do that? Conversations. Okay, what's the best way to spark conversations? There's still something magic about a book to do that. That's why.
And when you open up the book, each one is like its own separate conversation that was like, maybe it feels like it was meant for you that day. Like, it's this message that you're delivering that, I mean, it could be for anybody, but each one is like so special, but they're also so short, and impactful, which, I mean, I love the white space that you have around it. The message is concise and to the point. It's just, there's no jargon. It's just, sharing those conversations, like you said, and there's a few of them in here that I noticed, like you've added your own or injected your own little story into some of them too. So, I mean, do you have a few favorites out of the ones that there's 101, I think you did?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's actually the subtitle. The book's called Your Money, Reimagining Wealth Through 101 Simple Sketches. And yeah, thank you for that. That was really, it was a lot of hard work. And the other thing that sort of just aligned around why now is a publisher that really allowed me to push the limits of, readers will notice this once they get the book. All the front matter that's normally in a book, like the copyright stuff, all that stuff, they allowed me to move that to the back. Because I was like, can we just, like in service of the reader, can we just get in?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I was like, there's no way they're going to say yes to this. And they were like, well, because I was just thinking in service of the reader. And they were like, yeah. So, and the amount of white space they allowed me to leave, like I just wanted to breathe. I want there to be room for notes. So yeah, and in terms of favorites, I am a big fan of, some of the stuff early there's an early section. So the book's divided into 10 sections. Each of them have 10 sketches and essays. And then there's this 101, this last one that we added at the end. And there's an early section number 2 called Mindset. And I really like a lot of those sketches. One of my favorite in there is, and all the sketches, that's the other thing they allowed me to do. There's no page numbers. It's just each sketch is numbered. So sketch number 16 is, I wonder how much they make. It's like a thought bubble. So if you imagine like a small little circle and a bigger circle to a thought bubble over somebody's head, and it says, I wonder how much they make. And I've always loved that sketch, but that idea of so often I think it's because we're competitive, like resource competitive humans. Like it's sort of like wired into us. And I think what we're ultimately competing on, like what we ultimately want, and it doesn't have to be a competition, what we ultimately want is happiness. But because there's no unit of measurement, like I can't say like I have 12 units of happiness. How many do you have? We've built in a bunch of shortcuts, which are a disaster. Like, so first, the first shortcut we make is how much we think we're saying, how much do they have? And that somehow that would equate to happiness. And I know nobody like sets out to do this, and we'll all deny it because peer pressure and comparison is what kids do in high school. But adults, of course, don't do that.
Never. Never.
So the first thing we do is like, how much do they have? And we think we're getting some clues on how much they have by what they spend. So we're like 4 layers deep in like faulty assumptions.
For sure.
Right. And then we think even like outward expressions. One of the reasons for this sketch, I believe one of the early stories, I was just looking down at the story. When we lived in New Zealand for 4 years, and in New Zealand, we were in a small town on the South Island. And in New Zealand, the world doesn't revolve around money. In other places, money is the organizing force of life. Money and work. Like you organize your life. We organize our lives around money and work. New Zealand, it wasn't that way. And we attended this church, and we'd go every week. And it was very unusual to see a really flash car in New Zealand in this part of New Zealand, and even more rare to see it at church. And it might have been normal here, but it was very rare there. And I remember one week I showed up and there was a Range Rover in the parking lot. And I remember thinking, oh, I wonder whose that is. Who's the person who I remember sitting in the congregation trying to figure out who the happy one was. And I probably didn't say that, but I was like, who's the rich one? Who's the one that has and then I realized, like, there's so many problems with this story. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know anything about the person who drove that car here. I don't know if it's their car. It could be the mechanic, for that matter. They could have paid cash for it. They could have mortgaged their house for it. I have no idea. And even more importantly, none of that matters. Mm-hmm. So I've been really curious about some of those, like I wonder how much they make. There's another one in there that ran in the New York Times that I still can't believe they let me put it in the New York Times. It's just a box. And it says, is mine bigger than yours? And I was like, that's fun. And then there's another one called Your Comparison Set, which has a small circle labeled my stuff and a big circle labeled everyone else's stuff. Mm-hmm. And the title of the sketch is What Envy Feels Like. So that's some of the ones from the mindset section that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. I recognize one of these because somebody else had mentioned when Carl talks about time, money, energy, and attention, and they were speaking to me about this concept that you had, and then I'm going through the book and I see the 4 sources of capital, and I'm recognizing this sketch and I'm recognizing this in conversations. And when you were talking about resourcing and resources, and then even that conversation about the car and the two that actually, it's funny that that's the story that you brought up, because the two that stuck out for me was this 4 sources of capital, for sure. This is something that advisors are kind of thinking about and dealing with obviously all the time. But then also, enough is enough, and kind of talking about, even the story about like going so far that, eating so much ice cream that it would potentially make you sick. Right. And I just thought that's such a simple and beautiful way to put it. And it also allows you to kind of sit back with something so simple, but then kind of adapt it to your life too, and think about like, where am I just having, where am I really spending my time, my resources, my energy, and attention? And am I doing that in the right spots? And then another day you could pick up something like enough is enough and think to yourself, everything I'm doing is fine. Like, I'm doing more than enough. And so some of them are, asking you these questions that help you reevaluate your life. And then some of them are even just providing this like sense of peace and reassurance. And so I just wanted to say, like, I so appreciate that. And I feel like everyone's going to take away something very different from each message, because you take those stories in and you kind of apply them, like you said at the beginning, like to your own life, to your own stories that you tell yourself every day. And so it's somebody who reads this, and I have maybe one takeaway from this, somebody else is going to have something completely different, because my experience from reading 4 Sources of Capital was completely different than Aaron's reading of 4 Sources of Capital. And I just thought that's so unique about this book. And I'm excited for everybody else to read it and to take this away. So you're doing the rounds right now to kind of get, let people know about this book.
It's never too early. Look, especially if you remember, like, I am not running around trying to sell books. I'm running around trying to have more conversations.
That's right.
And so the beautiful thing about this for me has been, it's been a forcing function for me to sort of come out of the little cave I've been writing my book in and interact in the world and have these conversations. And so we've got, I don't know what the number is now, but it's a lot of these scheduled. And it's precisely for this reason. Like, let's just talk for a second, if we could, about 4 sources of capital. I think it's really interesting. And I know your audience is a group of really progressive advisors who I love kind of pushing the edges on kind of just thought experiments. So 4 sources of capital, money, I use meta as the thing to remember, the mnemonic or whatever you call those: money, energy, time, and attention. And we could talk about all those. And one thing I find really interesting is to think about money and time for just a second. Like, I think attention might be like the most important one right now. It might be the most valuable. It's certainly the one that the titans of attention are fighting most for. Like, some of the most valuable companies in the world are companies just fighting for your attention. So that gives you a sense of how valuable your attention is. But here's a thought experiment for you around money and time, which I really loved, which was, what if you thought of money? I'm not suggesting you actually implement this. I'm saying just as a thought experiment. What if you thought about money as the same way you would about time, that you can't store it? Like, there's no place to keep it. When this second is over, it's gone. You can't ever, it's non-fungible. You can't have it back. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think about, how would you behave if that were money? So let's say at the end of the day, it's all gone. Tomorrow, there's a new allocation of it. Like, how would you be? And again, this is why I'm like, your audience is one of the places I can have this conversation. Like, nobody needs to run around saying you should behave this way. I'm just saying it's an interesting thought experiment. Like, what? Because it will be actually true one day. There will be more time, no more time, and there will be no more money. One day that will be true for all of us.
That's right.
So in the meantime, like, it's interesting to think, like, would I behave differently if I knew this needed to be spent or invested in the best way now? And how could I use, expanding it a little bit, how could I use all my sources of capital that way? Like, before we started, I had 10 minutes between this and the last podcast, and I went outside and I sat on a big rock next to a bunch of plants that I planted that the bees are going crazy over. And I just thought, like, this next conversation is the most important thing I'm going to do all day. And how can I be here, right? Because I've got attention and time and energy. I'm going to invest here. Mm-hmm. Well, what if we treated everything like that? Well, I don't know, but it feels to me like my life would be richer, which is an interesting word, right? Like, the fabric of my life would be more textured and richer. And I think that's what we're all after. So anyway, that's kind of the idea of one of the sketches, is like, yeah, you're right. Let's go wherever you want. What do you think of when you see that, and have a conversation about it?
So I love the 4 sources of capital, and enough is enough. But you're 100% right. I think my audience of niche advisors, I think, come to the table with very different thoughts around how to bring value to their audience, because they can get so deep into their content, into their clients' lives. And so they're able to take away some of these deeper questions that you have and use them with their clients as well, because they recognize that the value that they bring isn't simply on the money side, right? Yeah. It's so much deeper than that, and they know that the value that they bring is in the kind of questions that they ask and the realizations that they're able to get people, and a lot of that stems from being specialists, from being niche advisors.
For sure.
And so they're able to kind of go deep dive. And so I love that thought experiment, because people do feel that level of presence, right? When you are 100% in the conversation with them, in the moment with them, listening deeply to them, there is no other better experience and time well spent than that level of conversation. And I feel like my audience of niche advisors, that's exactly what they want to give people, to be able to kind of walk away with that. So that's certainly something that I would love to ask them. If we have a Q&A session or something along those lines, in my next kind of Ask Me Anything, is that kind of thought experiment of how they would take that away and think about that. And so the other one that was kind of on my mind all the time was enough is enough, because I do actually feel like that defining your own enough and is what's going to allow you to be able to allocate your time, your energy, your attention where it needs to go. And I think that that's something that niche advisors think about all the time too, is this where my, attention needs to be? Is this the right thing? Am I focused enough? That is just a constant question that I feel like niche advisors have. Is my attention, my time, my energy going into the right places? Maybe no other advisors who, I do feel like niche advisors especially think very deeply on that question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really insightful. I think one of my favorite things about this work is that the very same thing you do for your clients applies to your life and your business. Like I often say, want to be a better financial planner, be a better human. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of getting clear for yourself and running I just think of them as, I'm going to make a guess about what enough is, enough time. And first that we should establish, I don't think enough can be a number, right? I think if enough is a number, and this could be enough hours, enough money, enough book sales, enough clients, whatever. If enough is a number, you'll never have enough because the number will move. We all know that hedonic treadmill problem. So enough is only something you can be. It's something you can embody. But running little experiments, specific experiments, like ice cream is a very easy example. If you notice the diminishing marginal utility, diminishing marginal returns on ice cream, you quickly realize the first bite's amazing. I have a friend actually who orders 4 different desserts, and he's very good at this. He takes 1 bite of each, and shares them with the table, but he never takes more. And I asked him why, and he was like, well, because I've learned that the first bite's freaking amazing, right? And the second bite might be good, but the third bite's no fun at all, and the fourth bite might make me sick. So he's very intentional about that idea. So we can run little experiments around what is enough. Do I have enough clients right now? What would it look like if I had more? What would I look like if I had fewer? If I got what I think I want. This is something I've done with the use of ChatGPT, which I think is an incredible way. This is an incredible experiment. Take what you think you want and tell Chat, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. And then tell Chat, I want you to pretend like I've gotten there. Write the journal entry I would write on that day. Oh, yeah,
that future view experiment is so good.
Yeah, then you can read that and say, well, do I like that? Is that what I want? Do I want 10 employees? Mm-hmm. Do I want 1 or 2 trusted with 50 clients and the same profitability, the same take-home pay? I don't know. Which one would you want? Maybe some people do want, 15 offices and great. But there's another sketch in there around goals, the only goal that matters is yours. Getting clear about your goals will help you with what is your enough, not somebody else's. And by the way, be prepared for that to change and shift and move on you, and hold that tension tight. That tension's actually where the real value lies, is in the tension. And so imagine this is exactly the conversation you have with clients too. I want, the example I've been using is 5 billion in a sailboat. That's what I want. Oh, that's interesting. That's very specific. Tell me where you came up with that. Right. And we can eventually gently lead into have you ever been on a sailboat? And they're okay, what if you go spend an hour on a sailboat? Well, then you come back after that hour and you're like, I didn't like that. Oh, okay. We can change. Or I love that. So experimenting with enough, running experiments, trying to get clear signal about it is really important.
I think that's such an important differentiator, and you kind of described exactly what that is. But originally I was thinking enough is a feeling. But no, like you're describing enough as a state of being, and that you could potentially throw yourself into that state of being or a smaller subset of that state of being to see if that's exactly what you want in life or in that moment or for that month. And so those are, it's just, it's interesting to me that, and I wanted to kind of take a step back and just note that differentiation, it's not a feeling, it's a state of being, and that you can get yourself there anytime you want.
Yeah, look, one of the reasons we really know that is because we all know people with more money than their grandkids, I actually know a few people with more money than the whole state I live in would ever need, right? Who don't have enough. Mm-hmm. They're insecure. And then I have met other people who have almost nothing and seem to have enough. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where the boundary condition is for that. I don't know what that means. I just know that it's a state of being. It's enough is only something you can be, not something you can have. Mm-hmm. And we can run little experiments around like, what are the conditions under which I feel that way?
Mm-hmm. Because there's always going to be that fear in the back of people's minds, this like lack mindset or this scarcity mindset that people have around not having enough money, not having enough clients, not having enough if they take this or if they become this or if they, try this. And so there's always that fear in the back of people's minds. And I just love the idea that the only way to figure it out is to, and I mean, stealing one of your phrases is play in traffic, right? Try it. Take that one tiny step.
Yep. I think you're pointing to something really important that we, especially like people who plan for a living, like it's in your job, it's in your actual business card calls you a planner or an advisor. You build plans, you want precision, you're trying to project, but it turns out like real financial planning is really a process of being a little less wrong tomorrow, not being precisely correct today. And if we can learn to live in the value, the information that shows up when we take a small step. Because like sometimes I use Michael Kisses as a verb, and he knows this, like we're friends, it's fine. So like you can Kisses it to death, right? Like analyze it, spreadsheet it, build it. And then at a certain point, you're not going to get any more information until you take a step. So you make it a small step. And what will happen when you make that small step is new information will show up that would have never been available in the prior spot.
Yep.
So that's the process of like, okay, cool. What did you learn from that? And for your audience, like the thing to keep in mind here is the throughput of the cycle. So know where you are today, take a step, know where you are today, take a step, know where you are today, take a step. The throughput of that cycle is driven by the volatility of the client situation. Right? Like, for example, you could have somebody with a pension and, a retired person with a pension and Social Security that there's very little volatility in their lives. Like, we need to meet once a year, make sure everything's okay. You could have somebody else who's an entrepreneur who started a recent company. Like, it could be 3 times a day if something went, like, you call the bank, call me back. But that idea of like throughput of the cycle of where am I today, take a step, where am I today, take a step, driven by volatility. That's again, like there's a sketch in the book called Range of Outcomes, which is sort of getting at this idea of like, there's all these potential range of outcomes. If we sit here right now, there's no way we're going to be able to figure them out. Let's do our best job with our calculators and our spreadsheets because we're really good at this.
Yeah.
And know that it's going to require action.
100%. I say that to advisors all the time, that the only way you're going to understand more about your niche is to declare your niche, right?
Interact with them. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to interact with them. You have to, you have so many advisors that are worried about, calling themselves a specialist. And of course you're going to be better in years to come. But for now, you are a specialist. That is your niche. Go ahead and declare yourself as that. Get out there and take that next step, which might be different depending on the advisor, and play in traffic, figure out what your niche actually wants, figure out their fears, what they're worried about, what they're really looking for in an advisor, and understand how best to build your authority. But that's never going to happen if you don't take that step, if you don't, take that on as a state of being and not just, a feeling that you have or the feeling that you want to convey,
Or even an intention. Yeah. I love it. Jack Butcher says, want feedback, add a buy button.
Yeah.
and I love that idea of like,
that's so good.
Yeah, and here's the thing I think, keep in mind, like when the reason we avoid adding the buy button in this case or declaring a niche is because we're scared we'll be wrong. Mm-hmm. Well, I think if we can change that posture a little bit and learn to celebrate the wrongness, I call it disconfirming evidence. Like you made an assumption, you did an experiment, and some evidence showed up that you were wrong. Like you should celebrate that and I know that's hard, like emotionally, but if we could flip it on its head, like wouldn't you want, if you were about to head out to dinner with some friends and you had broccoli between your teeth, wouldn't you want someone to tell you?
Yeah. And the only way you're going to find out you're wrong is by getting in it.
Totally. You wouldn't know. Like I know I'm wrong about 15 things I'm doing right now. I just don't know which ones. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm not going to know until after. And so when they show up, I'm going to be like, okay, cool. There's only 14 left. Now there's only 30. Okay. I was wrong about that one too. Right. Like we sort of celebrate disconfirming evidence instead of confirmation biasing our way into a trap.
Yeah. The best entrepreneurs aren't not wrong. They're just faster at taking action.
Yeah. Amen. Right? Totally agree.
I'm so excited for this to come out in October. That is Your Money, Reimagining Wealth in Simple Sketches. 101, my goodness, simple sketches for everybody to take a look at.
One of my favorite financial planners pointed out to me that 101 and simple probably don't belong in the same sentence. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, I am excited about it.
Yeah, no, it's a good number. It's a great number. So I think you can get away with it.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful gift to everybody in the financial space, but then again beyond that, I think that this is something that anybody can absorb and find value in. And like you said, this is going to be starting conversations about money and about how people feel about these concepts, regardless of industry. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I just for your audience, if you want, the publisher has allowed me to put together an excerpt. It's got the cover, the table of contents, the intro, and then 7 of the full, the sketch, the essay. So and it's an advisor exclusive excerpt. So if you want that, you can just send me an email and I'll just send it to you. It's hello@behaviorgap.com is the way to get that. Just put in the subject line, advisor excerpt, and the team will reply.
Wonderful. I will definitely do that. Yes, yeah. I think my advisors would love that from you, Carl. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. Amazing.
Okay. Well, again, so excited for your book and congratulations one more time.
Thanks, Natalie. And thanks for the work you're doing. It's making a difference in the world. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you, Carl. Well, hopefully we'll chat soon.
Yep. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.